Hey guys, welcome back. In this video I will be going over the objects and the code that they need to work. I'm going to be going just from the bottom of the list upwards. I think I'll leave the game controller to be the very last one. It's a more complicated one, but let's just start from object platform. And I've actually gone ahead and I've created all the code already, so I'm going to be talking through the code instead of typing it at the same time. If I need to type it and talk about it, it takes too long. So let's start with the very simple one, object platform. So these are the little blocks that you're going to use to build those shields just above your hero. And you can see this one actually does not have any events because it doesn't do anything really. It breaks when it gets hit by a bullet. So there's no variable definitions, no events. I've just set the platform sprite to the sprite, and that's it. So that one's very straightforward. Basically, you don't have to change anything about this one. Instructions. This one's an easier one. So object instructions. This is an object that we'll be placing in the bottom right corner, or anywhere really in your room. And it'll just show some instructions on how to play the game. And as I said before, you could create this as a sprite, or you could create this as a draw function in an object. I chose the draw function because that way, if I change the font for the whole game using the fonts over here, then this will change accordingly. It just gives you more flexibility on the design. So for this one, there's no variable definitions, nothing to worry about there. The only thing we need to worry about is the events. So I have one event. It's the draw events. To get it, you go add event, draw, and draw. And then for the code, there's two things. Draw set horizontal align, H-align, that sets which way to write the text from. I set it to be right aligned, which means the text will be kind of moving to the left as you type it. That's because I'm putting it on the right side of my screen. So if I put this object on the very right side of the screen, the text will build to the left. And you'll see that in action later. And then the second line of code is draw text. This is the location. So location will just match the location of the object. And then the text itself has to be in parentheses. And I just wrote move, colon, A plus D, and then shoot, colon, space bar. So that's that object. Let's move on to object hero. So this is your main character. And there's going to be quite a few things happening with this guy. Let's start with the variable definitions. So the only variable definition that I have is the move speed. So move speed is how fast your character can move left and right. I left it to be a variable so that, I put in the variable definition so that when you go into the room editor and you drop this character into the game, you'll be able to change the move speed and play around with it. So if the character is moving too slow or too fast, you can change this variable in the room editor. So yeah, that's the only variable there. There's no physics and no parenting. So for events, we've got 5 events. Let's start with the create event. So to create the create event, you go add event, create. And in the create event, the only thing we really do is we set the image speed to be equal to 0. Image speed is the variable that controls the animation speed of the sprite. Now we know that sprites do have an FPS setting, which is the frames per second setting. And you have to think that image speed and frames per second work together to control the speed of the animation. So, for example, if you set the FPS to be 60 for a sprite, and we know our game runs at 60 frames per second, then all 60 of those frames would play in 1 second. But if you set, and that's if the image speed is set to 1. If you set the image speed to something like 0.5, now only 30 of those frames would get played in 1 second because it slows the frames per second to half, and so on. So when you set image speed to 0, it's literally saying I'm going to completely shut off animations and not have any animation happening, regardless of what the image speed of what the FPS of the sprite is. And we do that because we're only using the first image of the hero. Alarm 0, this one will also have image speed equal to 0. So alarms are something that fires once a counter has expired. We'll have to see where this alarm gets set. I believe it's not in the hero. Something else will set this alarm. and I have a suspicion it's when the hero dies, when he gets hit by a bullet. That's when he sets this alarm. Yeah, so that's alarm 0. To add the alarm event, you go add event, alarm 0, and then image speed equals 0. Also, you can copy and paste the code between create and alarm. It's the same code, so copy and paste. Key down A. So key down A means that you're pressing down the A key and you're holding it. Key down means that the key is being held down. To add that event, you go add event, key down, and then I want to letters and A. You're welcome to use the arrow keys if you'd like, so that's the left and right, or any other key that you choose. If you were to make a 2-player game, you'd have to choose some different keys for the second player. So the actual code in the key down A goes like this. It's a conditional. So the top section here, this is the conditional, and then the bottom section is the actual statement of what we want to do. So in the conditional says that X, so X is the horizontal position of the hero. If you take the X position of the hero, horizontal position, subtract the move speed, which in this case would be 3, so that's horizontal position minus 3, and then minus sprite width divided by 2. So that's the width of my hero divided by 2. So if I take these two numbers and subtract it from my horizontal speed, if that number is still bigger than 0, so what I'm trying to achieve here is I'm trying to say that if all this has been calculated and my hero is still to the right of the left edge of the game, then I can move. This is basically preventing the hero from going off screen. And then the other section is image speed equals 0. So we're checking to see that our image speed is set to 0. Because once again, we only want to be able to move when our character is not blinking. That blinking effect is saying that we're dead or dying. So when you're dying, you shouldn't be able to move. Yeah, so that's the conditional. So this is all true, and you can notice that I'm using the AND connector here in between. So that's saying that this has to be true, and this has to be true for me to be able to perform the statement. And the statement says the same thing as this here up here. Horizontal position minus equals move speed. So that's saying take the horizontal position, decrease it by move speed, and then store it in horizontal position. It's kind of the same as saying x equals x minus move speed. So it's just the top one is just a shorthand version of the bottom part, but it's saying the same thing. Okay, so that's the code for key down A. Key down D is the same idea, but this time we're going to be checking against the right hand side of the screen. So we go if my horizontal position plus my move speed, because plus is moving to the right. This is just standard mathematics graphing. Increasing your x value moves you to the right, decreasing it moves you to the left. So if my x position plus my move speed plus, once again, my half my sprite width is less than my room width, which is the coordinate for the right hand of the screen. So if that's true and my image speed once again is 0, then I move to the right. X plus equals move speed. So that's it for movement. And then for key press space, so this one you have to be careful. You can choose between key down space or key pressed space. The difference between them is key press only happens on the initial click down, whereas key down, as long as the key is being held down, the event will fire. So key pressed only fires once on the initial press of the button. And for the code, if you watch the original Space Invaders gameplay, you'll notice that the only time you can shoot a bullet is when there's no other good bullets in the air. So yeah, so you can only have one bullet in the game at a time. And the other one is whenever there's an explosion, it kind of freezes the game. So if there's an explosion, you shouldn't be able to keep firing. You have to wait until the explosion disappears. So that's what we're checking here. We're checking to see this function instance exists, and then you have to pass in a parameter we'll check to see if there's any of these instances or objects in the game currently. And the two objects we're checking for are object bullet good and object explosion. And by putting an exclamation mark before the function, it's saying I'm looking for the opposite. So the function says instance exists. Well, you can read it as instance does not exist. That's what the exclamation mark kind of does to it. So if there's no instances of bullet good and there's no instances of explosion, and also the hero's image speed is once again 0, which means he's active, then I can shoot. And this time you'll notice that I used curly brackets. That's because I have two statements. If you only have one statement, then you don't need to use the curly brackets. But if you have two statements in the conditional, then you need to then you need to use brackets. And the two statements are, of course, I want to play my sound shoot. So audio play sound, the name of the resource, sound shoot. So that's sound shoot comes from here. You can put that in here. The second number in this function tells you how important it is. It's like priority. You can see it down here, priority. That's saying how important it is to play the sound. This is not an issue when there's not a lot of sounds, but if your game had, something like 200-300 sounds playing at the same time, there's some sound cards in computers that cannot play that many sounds. It's too many sounds to process for a sound card. So if that's the case, then it would use the priority number to decide which sounds are more important to play. And the last part is, do you want it to loop? I do not want to play I do not want the shooting sound to loop, so I put false. So that's playing the sound, and then we need to create a bullet. So to create a bullet, we can use the instance create depth function. There's also an instance create layer function. These are just two different ways of creating instances. If you're using depth, it'll be put on the same layer. If you're using layer, it'll be put on a different layer. And the way you create an instance is you call xy, that's the location where it needs to be created. Then you put in a depth, so depth is how deep in the paper or how out of the paper you want it to be. And then, of course, the instance to create. So bullet, good. So that's it. That's it for the hero. That's quite a bit of coding, but still fairly simple. Like the logic of this code is not super complicated. Let's move on. So let's do game over next. I'm just going up the list. So game over, this is the object that's in the second room. So in the game over room, it doesn't have a lot of things to do. It just needs to print onto the screen your score. It needs to say game over and print your score. It needs to be listening to the key press spacebar. So when the player presses spacebar, it does something, which is take you back to the first room to restart the game. And then it also needs to play the game over sound. I thought these were the three things that it had to do. So it's got three events and no variables. So you go add event, create, that's the first one. This is the one where you play the game over sound. So it's the same code as from the hero. You go audio, play sound. This time we're using the game over sound, setting the priority to 100 and setting it to false, so it does not repeat. So the create event happens when an object is created first time into the game, and every time a room is switched to, so when you go from one room to another room, every object that's in that room, or every instance of every object that's in that room, gets created. So the create event is one of the first events that fires inside these objects. So, and it only fires once. So that's where we play the sound. In the draw event of this guy, notice that he doesn't have a sprite. We're going to be doing some drawing. So the first line of code, draw set horizontal align FA center. So this time I want it to be center line. So when you type, the words kind of extend both ways. That way I can easily throw this object right in the middle of the room, and whatever I type should be in the middle of the room. And then I draw two lines of text. The first line of text, once again, the location is the same as my object. This allows you to move the object around, and the text would move around as well. And I say game over your score in parentheses, but then you have to go plus string. This takes something that's not a string, so strings are usually letters and text, but you can't just combine string and other things together. You can only combine strings with strings, or that's at least in GameMaker. In some languages you can, in GameMaker you can't. So what you need to do is you need to take what's a number, so in this case score is a number, and you have to convert it to a string, and you can do that by using the string function. And then you use the plus sign to add these two together. So that shows game over and your score. And then the line below, notice how I shift everything down. I go draw text X, and then I go Y plus 16. So that will shift everything down by 16 pixels. You can play around with this number. You can make it a bigger number, smaller number, up to you. And then I type press space to restart. Yeah, that's fairly straightforward once again. And then the last thing is the key press space. So when you press the space bar, we need to restart the game. And to restart the game, you go game_restart. And this is kind of important for the whole flow of the game. Here you'll notice that I restart the game. When you restart the game, everything that happened in that game is gone. Like all the variables are reset, all the characters are reset, everything is reset to its original state. So that's a game restart. If I go into, we'll see it later on as I move up in another scenario, we don't restart the game, we just go to the first room again. That's so you can keep playing the same room over and over. If you're not dying, you can keep building up your score, right? Okay, so that's the game over object. I'm going to jump up to talk about the bad guys here. So let's go to bad guy 1. Bad guy 1, you'll notice that the code is grayed out. All the events are grayed out. That means that these events actually don't belong to this character. They belong to a different object. And the object they belong to is the bad guy parent. So we don't have to do any coding for the bad guy 1 or 2 or 3. What we need to do is we need to set the parent to be bad guy parent. So to do that, you can click on the parent button and then click on the drop down here and objects and select bad guy parent. And they'll set the parent of this bad guy 1 to be bad guy parent. That means anything that bad guy parent does, this object is also going to do. And this is good because we want all 3 of the bad guys to behave very similarly. The one difference is they're going to have different scores. So we'll come back to this object in a little bit. I'm actually going to do bad guy parent now. So bad guy parent has no sprite. That's because bad guy parent doesn't actually take part in the game. It's more like a controller for the other 3 bad guys. I am going to define a variable. So the one variable definition we have is so click variable definitions, click on add, and then you're able to add a new variable. And the variable is going to be points. And its default value I'm going to set to 10. And it's going to be a type. I can actually change this to integer. So yeah. So I'm adding. So each bad guy is going to have this variable called points, which is how many points they're worth when they get destroyed. And then we can go into events. In the create event, this is the first example of how you set an alarm in an object. To set an alarm, all you have to type is alarm, and then square brackets, and then the number of the alarm. So let me just demonstrate that. So if I go to alarm, you can see there's 0 all the way up to 11. That means you can set 12 alarms. And so whatever number you type in here, that's the alarm that you're currently turning on for some amount of time. And that time is measured in steps. So how many steps the game has progressed. This is actually called an array in programming. Whenever you use the square brackets, you're referencing an array. And an array is it's kind of like a variable, but a variable that contains many other variables within itself. So alarm, in this case, contains 12 containers for numbers, right? 0 to 11. And then, so yeah, alarm 0 equals random range 60 to 180. So if the game is running at 60 frames per second, I'm setting the alarms to somewhere between 1 second and 3 seconds. And it's a random number, so it'll change every time you play the game. So that's the create event. When alarm 0 fires, so that's when the alarm has counted down to 0, then we need to get these guys to shoot. Their behavior, the only thing that these guys really do is they shoot. But before they can shoot, we need to do some checks to see that they're not shooting each other, for example. So the first check I'm doing is that collision line. So collision line is a function you can use to kind of create an invisible line, run it across the screen, and any objects it hits would return. It would tell you if it hit an object. So the line I'm creating using collision line is going to have a starting point of XY. So that's the starting point of this object. So wherever the bad guy is, he's going to take his current position, and that's the one end of the line. The other end of the line is the same horizontal. So you can see X and X, it's the same. Horizontally, it's the same. But vertically, I shifted down 64 pixels. So you can imagine this is kind of like creating a line that goes straight down. And then the object that I'm checking for is bad guy parent. So any object that is related to this bad guy parent, if this line runs through any of these objects, then the collision line is going to return a true. It's going to say, yes, there was a collision. The next part is precise. Do I need these to be precise collisions? Nope, I don't really care about precise collisions in this case. And then the second part is not me. So does this include this object in the check or only other objects? And I'm saying don't include this object, include only other objects. And then of course I'm putting the exclamation in front because I'm saying I don't want there to be any collisions. If there's a collision, I'm not going to shoot because that means there's an object below me. But if there's no bad guy below me, then I can shoot. So that's the first part of the check. And the second part, of course, is I need to check if the hero's image speed is equal to 0. Once again, if the image speed of the hero is not equal to 0, that means he's dying, he's blinking. So if that's the case, I should not be shooting at the hero. But if the image speed is set to 0, that means the hero is active, moving around, then I can shoot. So these are my two conditions. And once again, you need brackets because you're doing two things. And you'll notice that this is very similar to how the hero shoots. We play a sound. It's the same sound. And we create a bullet bad, object bullet bad, right? So this is almost identical to the hero's code. We were just changing the object bullet good to object bullet bad. Yeah. And then we don't only want to shoot once. We want to be able to continuously shoot with some time between each shot. So once the alarm has fired, we use the same alarm to reset itself to sometime between 2 and 5 seconds. Yeah, 120 is 2 seconds, 300 is 5 seconds. You're welcome to change these numbers to be smaller if you want them to shoot more often, or bigger if you want them to shoot less often. Okay, so that's the alarm event. And then if any of these bad guys collide with the platform, that means they've reached the city, so they've infiltrated your city, which means you weren't defending well enough, and that's game over. So the way that happens is, first I'm going to check to see if the player's score is currently bigger than the high score. So if the player's score is bigger than the high score, then I'm going to change the high score to be the player's score. I'm going to open this save game file. So this is a new thing that you guys have not seen before. It's using this code, we can actually open a file on the computer. This time it's called savegame.ini. We can write to it. So ini write real means we're going to be taking a number and writing it into this file. So storing this number outside of the game into the file. This is how saving games work in most games. And then we just have to choose a section. I just call it score, a key, also call that score. And then I set the value of global high score into this. And then you have to make sure that you close the reading of this file, because if you leave it open, it's just extra resources being taken up. And then we go to next. That's the game over room. So if the platform has been hit, we record our score if we've scored higher than the high score, and we go to the next room. Okay, so that's the object bad guy parent, sorry. And I'm going to go back to my bad guy one, and I did say that there's no code in here. That's correct. Parent, we have to set the bad guy parent, and as soon as you do that, if you go to variable definitions, you'll get a grayed out variable, but you can change its value. So if you click the little pencil tool, you can rewrite its value to something else. So bad guy 1, I'm okay with being worth 10 points. But if I go to my bad guy 2, same thing. I'm going to set it to have a parent of bad guy parent. So to do that, you go parent dot objects and bad guy parent, like that. And I'm going to go down to variable definitions, and here you can see I've clicked the little pencil tool, and I'm rewriting the points for this guy to be 20. So this is the guy in the middle of the row. He's going to be worth 20 points. And finally, bad guy 3. Same thing. I've set the parent to be bad guy parent. And for variable definitions here, I'm setting it to 30. So the guys at the very top, bad guy 3s, they're worth 30 points. Okay, so that's the bad guys. How are we on time? So that's 25 minutes. I'm going to pause here, and then I'll continue on with the other objects in the next video. Thank you for watching.